And this is a series of video tutorials to talk about some historically difficult macroeconomics concepts. So the concept we're going to be covering in this video is the idea of exchange rates and how exchange rates are determined. So the first thing we should talk about before we go into this is the ideas of appreciation and depreciation. Appreciation is just when a currency becomes stronger versus another currency. So you can get more euros per dollar. And depreciation is when one currency becomes weaker versus another. So when each dollar gets you fewer euros. And we'll illustrate that graphically and mathematically. So the first thing that can determine or change exchange rates is the demand for goods. So if we're talking in euros per dollar, if the demand for US goods increases, then the demand for dollars will also increase. And the reason for that is if you demand US goods, you need to pay for them in dollars. So if this is our market for the supply and demand for the exchange of dollars on the international exchange market, then your demand for dollars increases because you want more dollars to pay for more US goods. So our demand increases like this. It shifts out. And when that happens, we end at a new exchange rate of 1.5 euros per dollar. And in this case, the US dollar has appreciated because before, $1 would get you 1 euro. Now, the exchange rate is 1.5 euros per dollar, which means that each dollar gets you 1.5 euros instead of 1. Because the dollar is now stronger against the euro, the US dollar has appreciated. So the first determinant of exchange rates is demand for goods. If the demand for US goods increases, the dollar will appreciate. The next thing that can have an effect on exchange rates is the US or the European interest rate. So if the US interest rate increases, a couple of things are going to happen. The first thing is going to be that the demand for dollars increases. And the reason for that is that if the US interest rate increases, you now get a better return on all of your investments in the US. If you put money in a bank to save it, with a higher interest rate, you get a better return. So more Europeans want to save money in US banks. But to save money in US banks, you need to have dollars. So with a higher US interest rate, the demand for dollars increases. So that's the first part of what happens with a higher US interest rate. The second part of what happens is that the supply of dollars decreases. And the reason that happens is because basically there are three things, if you're a US citizen, there are three things you can do with your money. You can spend it, you can save it in a bank, or you can put it on this international exchange market for dollars. If the US interest rate increases, you're probably going to put more of your money into a bank because you get a better interest rate on it, you get a better return for it. So you're either going to spend less money to put more in a bank, or you're going to not trade as many dollars on the international exchange market. So if you choose to kind of reallocate your money, the supply of dollars will shift back because it's likely that US consumers are putting less of their money on the international exchange market and saving more instead. So we kind of can't, from this graph, we can't see the effect on the quantity of dollars, but overall, the exchange rate is going to change. So say this puts us at 2 euros per dollar. Like in the last example, instead of getting 1 euro for each dollar, we can now get 2 euros per dollar. So because the dollar is stronger against the euro, the dollar has appreciated. So like with demand, an increased demand for US goods, a higher US interest rate results in a higher or an appreciated dollar. So a higher interest rate means that the US dollar appreciates. And then the final determinant of exchange rates, or the final thing that could change the exchange rate, is the inflation rate, either in the US or in Europe. And we said that the inflation rate is just changes in the price level. So if the price level is going up, we have inflation. If the price level is going down, we have deflation. So if the inflation rate in the US goes up, two things are going to happen on this graph. The first one is that demand for dollars is going to decrease. And the reason for that is that if you are a European consumer and you can either buy US goods or you can buy European goods, if the inflation rate in the US has gone up, then US goods are now comparatively more expensive. So you're probably going to not buy as many US goods. So you don't need as many dollars because you're not buying as many US goods, so your demand for dollars decreases. The second thing that's going to happen when the US inflation rate increases is that the supply of dollars will also increase. And the reason for that is that if you're a US consumer who can either buy US goods or European goods, and US goods are now relatively more expensive compared to European goods, you'll probably want to buy more European goods. To buy European goods, you need euros, so you increase your supply of dollars to trade for euros. You use the euros to buy more European goods. So the overall effect of these two changes, the decrease in demand and increase in supply, is that the exchange rate is going to go down. So before, if $1 would buy you €1, now a dollar only gets you half of a euro. So if the US inflation rate goes up, the US dollar depreciates. So we've showed that graphically, and then we can also show it mathematically as well. So here we're treating the euro as the home currency. So to figure out the exchange rate, the nominal exchange rate, we just do the price level of the home country over the price level of the foreign country. So if both of the price levels, both in the US and in Europe, are 100, we end up with an exchange rate of €1 per dollar. If the US inflation rate goes up, which would be reflected in a higher price level, then we would do price level in the home country over price level in the foreign country, and we would get a new exchange rate of 91 euros, or 0.91 euros per dollar. So before, $1 would get you €1. Now a dollar only gets you 0.91 euros. So a higher inflation rate in the US results in a depreciation of the US dollar. So either mathematically or graphically, we see that a higher inflation rate in the US means that the US dollar depreciates.